Hey everyone, I'm Max,
I'm Luke.
and welcome back to Upside Down Thoughts. We got another podcast with us today with Dover Motor Speedway. We've got a 1.0 mile racetrack here in Dover, Delaware. It's a very tough track to tame. It's on the schedule every single year. It's been for a very long time, and I'm going to jump right into it with the qualifying because it's a little different today. Uh, Getting into it with Sonoma. Sonoma is going to be a big part of the results being part of the qualifying for Dover, as qualifying in Dover was rained out. So the qualifying lineup for Dover was based off of what NASCAR calls the performance metrics base lineup, which is really interesting. This is actually something that neither of us even knew about prior to about 5 minutes ago, to be completely honest. But it's actually based off of 15% fastest lap time from the prior week being Sonoma, 25% the driver's finishing position, 25% the owner's final race finish position, and 35% the owner's points position overall throughout the season. So it's a really interesting way to set up the qualifying, but it's a pretty fair way for how NASCAR could really do it in these situations. I know, Luke, you had mentioned NASCAR possibly taking the average finishing results from the last 5 weeks and sorting the drivers that way. It's another great way to do it. There's probably a bunch of ways that NASCAR could possibly do this, but the way they do it with this metric lineup is not a bad way at all to do it. So jumping right into it, we'll go through the actual qualifying order and allow you to start that.
Yeah, I just want to take a few seconds and actually praise NASCAR for this method that they used. Instead of just taking the easy way out and taking the last week's finishing results and have that as the qualifying order, they actually used a really cool system and used a bunch of metrics from every aspect of the sport. And owner points are more prevalent, like F1 and that kind of series, and they're not really noticeable in NASCAR, really talked about. So I think it's really cool and a great way to do it. But yeah, so obviously that means Chase Elliott would be starting on the pole position for us here today. In my opinion, he's been the most consistent driver, and in my opinion, he's been the best driver all season. So really no surprise here on the pole position. Behind him with Chase Briscoe. I said we're going to keep talking about him over these next couple podcasts of how consistent he's been as well. So, and then you got two Toyotas behind him of Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick and William Byron, which is Chase Elliott's teammate, running out the top five. So already you can see the consistency really relaying into the qualifying effort. And obviously what we just talked about with the how they qualified it and how they did all these metrics to determine the lineup. It kind of makes sense. Everyone in the top five, really.
Yeah, and continuing to go further down the lineup, we just see more guys that shine more in Sonoma and kind of are up here at Dover as a result of, their speed in Sonoma, and that being SVG in 6th, McDowell 7th, Logano in 8th, who had speed, Ty Gibbs 9th, Kyle Busch 10th. He had a good run in Sonoma. Even Ryan Preece, Chris Buescher, they both had good runs. Josh Berry had a top 10 run at Sonoma. He's starting 14th. And going a little further back, we have Keselowski in 15th, Bowman 16th, Allmendinger 17th, Suarez 18th, Chastain, my pick to win for Dover in 19th, and Justin Haley in 20th.
Yeah, and finishing it off here, we see Ty Dillon in 21st, and he's going up against John Hunter Nemechek, qualified in 28th in the 42 for the semifinals of the Bracket Challenge. Obviously, we know he does pull it off and beat him in that Bracket Challenge to go into the championship against Ty Gibbs, at Indy. But just moving further down, we see Kyle Larson in 25th. So, like we mentioned last week, with the disappointing run in Sonoma, obviously that would relay to next week here at Dover for the qualifying effort here. Then we see Ryan Blaney in 31st. No surprises there. He obviously got wrecked last week, so that didn't help him out. Same with Ricky Stenhouse, got wrecked. Hocevar got wrecked. So you can really see the them tying in with Sonoma. So if anyone was a little confused, as I was, to why some people were getting these spots because they didn't qualify, well, hopefully that cleared up some confusion. Definitely cleared up some confusion for both of us about how they really determined this qualifying effort as it was rained out.
Yeah, it sure did. But, we can, of course, get right into the race. But prior to starting the race, I do want to mention that there will be a competition caution at lap 35 as NASCAR is yet again testing another new tire compound here at Dover this year. And as a rule in NASCAR's actual rule book, which I found prior to starting this podcast, we actually didn't think there was one. But contrary to popular belief, there is one. And there will be a yellow flag coming out at lap 35 to check in with everyone's tires and make sure everything's holding up, as there was no practice in qualifying. But Elliott and Briscoe will lead us to green, and it's going to be slightly calm off the line, but around lap 10, we're going to see Shane Van Gisbergen, who is going to start to report a problem with a possible tire issue, and he's going to lose a ton of spots, losing 31 spots, going from sixth place, where he started his highest oval start as a result of Sonoma, all the way back to 37th. And what could have been a good oval day for SVG is down the drain in the first 10 laps.
Yeah, and really, when he was pulling into the pits, I didn't see too many things wrong with that tire. Initially, I thought it was cut down, starting that high as quickly as he was falling back. I think it was just an overheating issue with the tire and all that stuff, as you said on the radio. So obviously not the way you want to start this race, almost 10 laps in, going, dropping 30 spots. And it was kind of like, bumper cars. Everyone was trying to swerve out of the right, not running their preferred line. It was really sketchy here, these first 10 laps. Everyone was, staying away from each other and trying to figure out their car, as they really they didn't have any practice or qualifying or any chance to get their setups right before the start of this race. So obviously with that, I expected some difficulties, but this was wild to see for Shane. And, I really just want to see him run well at some of these places. I know Dover is one of the hardest tracks to run, especially because it's concrete and, the walls are, that's why they call it the Monster Mile. The walls kind of pop out at you. It's super hard to run, but man, he's got to get his confidence up with these short tracks, especially. And here, it obviously would not happen off the bat.
Yeah, and even though he's not going to see a good result here at Dover, we are able to see that, he is improving. And, not that he's going to be winning ovals in the next season, or, maybe, who knows, with super speedways on the schedule, you really never know. But, how long will it be until you see a guy like him competing at 1.5s, or, there's the complete other end of the spectrum. Maybe he will never be able to compete at those. And, I think there's a lot of people that really hope he is able to eventually. They kind of trump, I think, all the people that, are like, that I would say more dislike him and are like, we don't want this guy to succeed, can only win road courses, blah, 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 and, are going to hate him for his background, which I think is just, ridiculous. But, what are you going to do about it? You can't change other people's opinions and critics of the sport. So moving on from SVG's unfortunate moment, we're going to see Briscoe get by Chase Elliott, but quickly after, Elliott is going to get back by Briscoe, and he's going to pull out to just about a 2-second lead over him. And we're going to see the competition caution come out at lap 35, and it's going to allow us to get another restart.
Yeah, and early in the race, I liked there was ability to pass at for the lead and for these top 10 positions, and then kind of stretch things out towards before the competition caution. But one thing I do want to mention before we get into the restart, NASCAR made a change before the midway point of the season, where they're going to add 900 horsepower to the cars at short track. Something ended up happening where they didn't do that. I think currently run like a 750 horsepower package at short tracks. So obviously we've talked a lot about the car and how air is really a problem at these tracks. Similar to Bristol, you can't really pass for the leads. So, obviously they're going to make the change to hopefully, spark that up. And we see at Iowa where it was, William Byron was half throttle and he was gaining time on the guys behind him who were going full throttle. So I don't know what happened with the the call for them not to do this switch, but I know Kevin Harvick was talking about on his podcast where, the cars just need to simply go faster to get these tracks back in the light what they once were. You look back 10, 20 years ago and these tracks were fan favorites getting sold out every single year. And, I understand the rain was a problem at Dover all weekend, but you saw those stands halfway filled. So I'd love to see 900 horsepower in these cars, especially moving forward for next season. I don't think it would be a safety issue at all, but we see ARCA cars outpacing Cup cars at some of these tracks, going faster average lap speed. So something we've got to change, but don't want to spend too much time on that topic, as we do have a restart get back into with Chase Elliott and Chase Briscoe, the same two, getting us back to green here.
Yeah, and I'm just going to continue to add on to your horsepower talk here. NASCAR actually just, I think the other day, decided that there's going to be no changes with the horsepower until at least 2026. So I'm really curious to see where NASCAR is going to decide to go with it and how much of a change horsepower will really make. because sometimes I wonder if it's or do the cars not have enough power behind them, or is it the aerodynamic design of the car? So it almost, not to sound like a nerd, but are there bigger problems than saying, hey, let's just put more horsepower in these race cars? So it's really a tough and a tough decision for NASCAR to make, and it's really heavy on their shoulders because short track racing is kind of destroyed right now, and a lot of different people are throwing out possible solutions for it, and no one really knows what's going to work. And NASCAR's tried different things. We've tried different tire compounds. We've tried adding extra fins on the roofs and stuff. There's NASCAR is making innovations to the current race car, but they're just not exactly working. So, it makes me happy enough to see that NASCAR is at least trying to do something about it. It's just not working yet. But getting off the topic of the horsepower and the short track racing overall, we do get back to green. Elliott and Briscoe are going to remain side by side for about a lap, with Elliott eventually completing the pass, point out to about a 2-second lead. And Christopher Bell and William Byron are also going to sneak by Chase Briscoe. He's going to go back to fourth and eventually fifth as Denny Hamlin gets by him as well. And, these are the problems we've mentioned with Chase Briscoe in the past. He qualifies up front, doesn't have the speed, and can't stay up there.
Yeah, and it just took the words right out of my mouth. He qualifies so well, and the speed just does not transfer over to Sunday, and it's really a problem that they're seriously going to have to fix before the playoffs start. I know they've sorted it out heavily, and they've worked on it a lot, looking back on the Coca-Cola 600 where he qualified up front and then just at a horrible first stage. And, I know it's not all his fault, and, stuff like this happens, but definitely want to clean this up before the playoffs start, because track position is everything, as we know, with this car. And in the first round of 16, I think it's all short tracks pretty much. So definitely want to clean up this problem. But, as we continue this green flag run here, Christopher Bell would gap Chase Elliott to almost half a second here as they're going through lap traffic. And I got to say, lap traffic, I've been at Dover before, 2023, and lap traffic is seriously a problem. There's cars everywhere all over the racetrack. It's one of the hardest races to follow. If you're there, you have no idea who's in the lead. You have no idea where, your favorite driver is in the position. Everyone's running multiple lanes. Everyone's tight, loose, and it's just kind of a shit show, really, to say the least here. And so props to these guys for getting through lap traffic as clean as they did. I know it's super difficult, especially with the Gen 7 car, but they were keeping it tight, keeping it competitive. We really don't see Christopher Bell pull too far away from Chase Elliott, so it's good to see there. Making improvements definitely to the car, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and you mentioned the improvements. Well, it's just a big thing. Chase Elliott's leading this race, and he has that clean air, the benefit of clean air, but now he gets, to the back of the pack, and he's saying, now I'm in dirty air too. I'm facing the same thing as Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell had better pace, ran up to the back of him. We see some good racing. Elliott does eventually get around Suarez and gets back to the lead. But Suarez really did not want to go a lap down and does a really good job. And, I kind of like Dover for that reason, where lap traffic, if they want to, they can really cause a problem for the leaders, which I think is actually a cool aspect. At a lot of other tracks, like you see, Las Vegas, Miami, Texas, a lot of those tracks, a lap car will just get out of the way or doesn't cause a huge impact, So I really like that aspect about Dover, even though the reasoning they make an impact is for the reasons we all complain about. But continuing on from there, we get very close to the end of stage one, and we're going to see Cody Ware get very close to the wall with about 3 to go in the stage. He's going to stay out of the wall, do a nice job there. But just as we're giving him a round of applause, Eric Jones is going to get into the wall in turns 3 and 4 and has a flat tire. This is with 1 to go in the stage, but NASCAR does not throw the yellow. And I'll let you make comments on this first, but when I was watching this live, I don't understand how this was not a yellow.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. He was almost, half a lap. He scraped the wall twice and cut a tire down. Props to him for, not spinning himself out, or he kept the car, going in the right direction. But way off pace, caused a lot of problems for a lot of drivers. And just as we see him with tire issue, we see AJ Allmendinger experience one with an unwound tire on the track. So I don't really understand the no. It wasn't like we had an insane side by side battle for a stage win here. Chase Elliott was, just plowing putting the foot down to the floor and driving off. So I feel like a caution wouldn't have made a difference. But I get it. No one really ruined their day. But definitely interesting with a no caution call. And we've had several of these this season. I can recall where it was just a head scratcher with a no caution call here. So something that's been a problem these past few years. And, can't really say anything else than we just got to clean it up and be 100% confident in the calls that we're making here.
Yeah, I've got two quick comments. And it's number one, the track is tight in the first place. It's really thin for the speed, and that's my other point. It's super high speed. So with Eric Jones, probably 40 miles an hour, if not more, off pace, running the top of the racetrack, which down the front or down the straightaways, the front and the back straightaway, it's the preferred line, and he's there when we're still under green with a lap and a half to go in the stage. It's just a dangerous situation, and just building off of what you said, it's not going to change the results of the stage. The top five are fairly well separated, so it's just a little lackadaisical on NASCAR's fault. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna hound NASCAR for it, and I'm not gonna stay on the topic. But I feel like NASCAR just needs to know a little bit that they might have made a mistake there. But again, I'm not gonna continue to stay on that topic, as we do get to the stage one eventually under green. Lap later, and it's going to be Elliott, Bell, Denny Hamlin, who's up 10 spots up in the third, William Byron, and Alex Bowman. So good stages for all five of those drivers.
Yeah, and the stage finishers want to touch on Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Hamlin, Byron even, and Chase Briscoe, who I want to mention again, who didn't finish in the top five. But every year we go to Dover, even before we had the Gen 7 car, it's always these group of like 6 or 7 great cars that are just up front the whole day and battling for this win. Even going back, 10, 15 years when the Jimmy Johnson era of cars, we'd see him battle with Jeff Gordon here a lot and some other cars. But it's always just these group of, 5 to 10 cars that, really are the only ones that have a chance to win. So that's just kind of how Dover is. It's how it's really always been. And I kind of like it for a fact. As we get further into this race, we're going to talk about the battles with Bell and Hamlin especially, and then Bell and Chase Briscoe, and then, some struggles that we're going to talk about with Chase Elliott. So, if you're not a fan of any of these drivers that are running up front, I can get it that it can get a little boring. But, if you're a fan, you're on the edge of your seat the whole time. Because your driver has a shot if he's inside this top 10, with how important track position is at all short tracks, but especially at Dover.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But, we will continue to move on. And, under this yellow, before the start of stage 2, a lot of drivers are going to report heavy cording on their tires. And, when I heard this watching, the broadcast on TV and hearing this, I was like, oh, really? We see the problem with Cody Ware getting up the track, Eric Jones, AJ Allmendinger. I was like, yeah, I think we are having cording issues. But, it was a little interesting to see that with this new tire compound, it took 120 green flag laps to start seeing cording, which, in my opinion, is a little ridiculous. When it comes to tires, I'll let you kind of give your side of this too, but when it comes to tires, I almost like that Bristol. I can't remember when it was, but remember when the tires were just melting down, and if you had good tires, you were like a good 2 seconds faster than the drivers on bad tires per lap, and I really enjoyed that. And the tires were melting down really fast, so it really made strategy a huge call, and especially with a race like Bristol, the teams have 12, 14 sets of tires, so that's a much cooler, I would say, tire race than what we're seeing here, where it's like, let's see how far we can run these tires. We can practically run our tires further than we can the fuel cell, which in my opinion is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, I feel like this is like the 8th different tire compound we've had at these short tracks, and nothing has changed. I don't understand the want or the need to keep putting out these different tire compounds from Goodyear and NASCAR making these calls. The tires aren't the problem. The tires are the problem because they suck. I'll just say that they've sucked since the next gen cars, been in factor these last 4 years. But as long as we keep putting out these tire compounds, nothing's going to change. It's still going to be this tough air racing. And you mentioned Bristol last year, which was in the springtime, which was just a hellhole that we saw 10 cars wrecking in the span of 20 laps. So I thought it was cool. I thought it was a little bit of I felt like I was watching an ARCA race a little bit with how many crashes there were. I thought it was a different mix up of. I'm sure the crew chiefs were having a brain aneurysm after the race, so I'm sure they didn't enjoy it, but I thought it was pretty cool. Would I like to see that for a playoff race? Probably not. I feel like it was a little too not childish, but yeah, a little aggressive. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we figured out the problems with these cars, and I feel like the tires aren't one of them. That I shouldn't say that. Tires are definitely a problem with how much they're rupturing and getting flat, but it's definitely not a tire compound problem is the right word I'm looking for.
Right. And, I think what we need to find is we need to find that balance, that happy medium that I feel like we talk about a lot because, you mentioned Bristol was a little excessive, aggressive. We had tires gone in 20 laps, which is, you mentioned feels like you're watching an ARCA race, which for those of you that might not be avid NASCAR fans, probably don't even know what the ARCA series is. And at some tracks, to be honest, nothing against the ARCA guys, but it's hard to watch. It's you see a lot of car issues, tire issues, whatever it be, and that's almost what Bristol felt like. But at the same time, we also don't want to see barely any tire fall off after 120 laps. Maybe we need to find that happy medium somewhere in between, maybe 40 to 60, 40 to 80 laps, anywhere in there. I'm good with that. If we're running a place like Bristol, I'm all good with 80-lap tires. If we're running a place like Dover, I'm all good with 40-lap tires. So I think that's more along the lines of what we need to find. We just need to, maybe move the meter on the tires a little bit. Just say, because NASCAR obviously with what they're doing at the compounds, they have the ability to make the change of how quick the tires will wear depending on the surface of the racetrack. And I think NASCAR just needs to delve a little deeper into that and take more time to look at it more particularly.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I know how much people hate fuel suit racing and, races determined by fuel, but I feel like at short tracks especially, crew chiefs shouldn't have to be worrying about how quickly, tires shouldn't be wearing quicker than fuel. I feel like fuel should always be the main concern at short tracks because of how long the green flag runs are. And, I know going back to Iowa, I'm going to keep saying this. And, it was hard to watch at some points because you just didn't really understand. William Byron was halfway on the throttle and not catching. But that's not really his fault or a problem that's causing by the fuel. It's just caused by these cars. So I absolutely love fuel racing for short tracks. I think it makes it so interesting to watch. I know I'm probably outvoted there on the majority. I know people don't like it a lot. I want to know a lot of NASCAR fans complain about they don't want to watch, a race determined by fuel. I get it, but at short tracks, I feel like that should be the main concern is always fuel for a crew chief. And I feel like tires, when they get in the way of being problem more than the fuel, it creates all these other issues and just, puts a damper on the race and, puts really a setback for the crew chiefs and for these drivers.
Hey, a lot more valid points there, what you just went over. And this is another thing, we could harp on it forever, but as we always do, we have to move on. So getting back into stage 2, or should I say the start of stage 2, we're going to see an Elliott Bell front row. Elliott's going to get to the lead. Bell is going to fall into second with Hamlin and Byron ending up in third and fourth. And Bowman's going to round out the top 5 after getting around Chase Briscoe shortly after the restart.
Yeah, and a lot of movements on the restart on the top 10. But Chase Elliott's car, I mean, this thing was a beast out there. I haven't seen him run a short track like this in a long time. Gapping Christopher Bell to over half a second. And then, obviously would face some challenges in lap traffic. But his car had so much downforce and so much grip in the corners. It looked like he was almost just running, flat out full throttle, just blitzing by these guys. Right now, I thought he was a clear favorite to win the race, and I really thought no one had anything for him. Obviously, where Noah's car gets a little bit weaker after these few pit stops and after these tire strategies, and everyone kind of adapts to what he's doing. But so far, I don't think anyone's got anything for Chase Elliott.
Yeah, certainly not. And it is going to lead us to the first green flag pit stop. Zane Smith's going to start it with his 38 team coming to pit road. But shortly after, we're going to see the leaders come to pit road, and this is where it's going to start the struggle for Chase Elliott. He's going to have a 15-second stop after falling off the jack. And, as an Elliott fan, I'm like, we won Atlanta. We just need another one so bad, especially closer to the playoffs. And knowing a 15-second stop, especially with the stops being a lot shorter now with the single lug nut in the past few years, and especially knowing the races at Dover and it's very difficult to pass, I was like, I don't want to be a downer, but, his race is over. There's no chance, but it's just such a sucky situation for Elliott and the 9 team overall. But getting back to it, the green flag cycle is going to continue, and we're going to see Hamlin and Bell battle for the lead with Hamlin staying ahead.
Yeah, and once this kind of happened for Chase Elliott, it really prevailed, Hamlin and Christopher Bell, 2 Toyota teammates, to get to the lead. And, Denny Hamlin would obviously be, a little bit behind Christopher Bell to over 1.3 seconds going through this lap traffic a bit and, kind of cycling out this green flag run. But the battles can continue back in 3rd through 10th. We see Bowman and Byron making moves to pass Daniel Suarez to get back up into 3rd and 4th through green flag pit stops. And then Chase Elliott would get back up into 5th. So wouldn't lose too many spots. Obviously would be still almost 6 seconds back from the lead. So, I could mention track positions, everything at short tracks, and this would obviously put a damper in his race. But, stuff that just has to be cleaned up for that pit crew, especially going into the playoffs. And, putting together a complete race at these short tracks is so difficult. I'm always going to keep mentioning this. Just being perfect on pit road is the biggest thing that you can do to help out your driver. No mistakes, no continuities, no defects, nothing like that, and you're going to have a good day. So it's unfortunate. It's going to happen from time to time, and I feel like his pit crew has been, almost perfect since then, as we're, a couple of races ahead. So obviously they've cleaned it up, but it just sucks when your car is so good running out in the lead like that.
And it also goes to show you that, the driver is not 100% of the race result for a team. It might be, I would probably say it's probably around, probably 70% driver, 30% pit crew. The driver is who gets all the spots, passes all the race cars, drives the car the entire time. But, pit crew, if they don't do their job, all that work that a driver does in a green flag run can be gone like that, So it's just really, really bad to see this happen to Chase Elliott, who had such a good race car. But you did mention the lead with Bowman and Byron battling to get closer to it. Well, the leader is not Denny Hamlin anymore. And this comes to another very interesting situation where Chris Bell was able to get around Denny Hamlin as he got held up severely by the lap car, number 10, Ty Dillon. And Denny Hamlin had some choice words for the 10 team after this. I'm not going to get into it directly, but he was quite upset with Ty Dillon, to say the least. And I want to know your opinion. Is this an overreaction or is it validated?
I think it's perfectly validated, and usually I'd be on the side of not Hamlin. I think he gets a little over aggressive in the car sometimes, gets hot headed, but losing that many seconds, I think he'd be down to almost 5 seconds, looks to be almost 4.5 here from Christopher Bell, and that would just pretty much change the complete way the stage 2 would go. With Denny Hamlin not really have a chance to catch up, and if you're a lap car, I know how hard it is to figure out where to get out of the way. And here where I'll give props to Cody Ware. I know he bashed him last week, but does a great job with it. He's always getting lapped all the time at these tracks, and he finds a way to get out of the way. I know it's difficult to know where the car behind you is going to go, but I understand Ty Dillon. You're racing for that $1 million prize, but you got to give up the spot. You're a lap down. You got to know where you are. Got to know your place. You can't be causing checkups like this, especially for not even Denny Hamlin, especially for drivers behind him, could cause some huge checkups, huge problems. some wrecks that don't need to happen, and you don't have Denny Hamlin pissed off at you, because that's a world of trouble, as we know.
Yeah, and I'm slightly going to come to the defense of Ty Dillon here. We saw a situation earlier in stage one with Daniel Suarez and Chase Elliott and Christopher Bell, where Christopher Bell closed way in on Chase Elliott because he was being held up by Daniel Suarez, who didn't want to go a lap down. Daniel Suarez had pace, was able to stay on to the lead lap until eventually getting lapped right around the end of the stage, but he would get his lead or his lap back with the lucky dog, as he was able to hold Chase off long enough that the car in front of Suarez wouldn't get past. So I maybe Ty Dillon was trying to do the same thing here. It's a little earlier in the stage, so it's not quite as justified, but also, you do want to mention it's not like Ty Dillon is 20 miles per hour off the pace, of the leaders here. He's only about 3/4 of a second off pace of Hamlin and Bell, so that's just how Dover works. Like it's a very interesting racetrack where, you could be 3 laps down and be within half a second of the leader on lap time. So it's just a really weird scenario overall, but yeah, should Ty Dillon have gotten out of the way with it possibly being a long green flag run? Yeah, probably, but there is also a situation some might forget, he still is racing for $1 million. So if he knows where Nemechek is at that point in time, maybe a caution comes out, maybe Nemechek's behind him. I don't know where he was at the time of this, but if Nemechek's behind him, caution comes out, Ty Dillon will be on the lead lap, Nemechek's trapped a lap down. So there's a lot of scenarios here that the 10 team might have been going over on the box and saying what would have gotten them towards the $1 million rather than just saying, let's hold up the 11 because we don't like him, or something like that.
Right. And also, just to add to your point even more, John Hunter Nemechek, who he's battling not only for the free pass position, but for the $1 million, is directly in front of him. He's the first car a lap down. So you have to add that into the equation as well. So, I think it's a two-sided story for it, definitely. And, if I'm Ty Dillon, I should rephrase what I said. I'm not saying get out of the way, but, I get it. You want to try to stay in front of the leaders as much as possible, because if you go 2 laps down, your race is pretty much over here. So, and this would obviously be one that, TNT would cover heavily for these drivers. And they did a really, really good job covering this. And, they would stay in front of Denny Hamlin, but that would only bring Alex Bowman up behind him. Who was, over 2 seconds behind Denny Hamlin. He's cut that lead down to under a second. So we'd really see the battle for the for second and third coming up here. But just as that's happening, we see AJ Allmendinger pit from 26 with a reported brake issue that started in stage 1 and would continue to go. So he would have to come back down a couple laps later after having no right rear brakes, which would obviously be a problem. You have to go behind the wall, so his day would most likely be over, as that is a difficult one to fix there before the race ends.
Yeah, of course. We're going to see another issue here. Hocevar, he's going to get loosened up into the wall in turn 2 from 29th. His day, he did have a speeding penalty earlier, which we did not cover during the green flag cycle. So his day was going from terrible after starting in the back to pretty good, running in the lead, to bad to even worse. So it's been a pretty rough day for Carson Hocevar. He just finished all his drama with Stenhouse. He has a bad run here at Dover. He's going to have his off week at Indy, and then he's going to get right back into it at Iowa. So what a season for Carson Hocevar it's been. But continuing to move on, we're going to see Allmendinger pit yet again. You mentioned he did go behind the wall for about 2 laps, came back out on track, had more problems, and his day will be officially over. So this is something I actually want to talk about real briefly, but it's something that NASCAR, has changed just this year. And I don't think we've talked about it a whole lot on the podcast overall, but it's the ability that when your car has damage, to take it actually back to the garage, make repairs that you can't make in the pit stall, and bring it back out onto the track, even though you might be a bunch of laps down, to try to, pass cars that might have an incident later in the race. So it is something that I really like by NASCAR, but we did mention, I believe it was back at Mexico City, when Kyle Larson had his problem very early in the race, and then goes back to the garage, makes repairs, comes out and sets the fastest lap of the race. Is that a problem? Possibly. But, I think overall, this rule that NASCAR has re-implemented, as I believe it was a rule many years back. I think it is for the better overall, even though it does have a few flaws. But when you add a new rule, especially the first year, it's going to have problems and things that we can always fix, down the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to Darlington, where you see Kyle Larson, wreck in front of the leaders, and then cause it a overtime restart and shake up the order. So you can see it has its flaws, but I agree 100%. I think it's heavily outweighed by the pros instead of the cons here. The rule used to be, I think, 10 minutes on pit road. And if you couldn't fix it, I think your day was over. So it didn't really make too much sense. 10 minutes is nowhere near enough time to get that car back ready. But
Actually, I think it was less time. I think it
yeah,
was
right.
7 or 8 minutes,
Yeah,
which is totally ridiculous to say, hey,
yeah.
you were just going to crash, fix it in 7 minutes.
I think it gives especially teams who are maybe a little bit underdeveloped or behind that playoff bubble to have a chance. We talk about points so much in this day and age of NASCAR. Every single point matters. And get that, like you mentioned, Larson getting that just one extra point for the fastest lap, Xfinity fastest lap, could change everything here in the regular season points chase. So I absolutely love the rule change, but get back into the end of stage 2. Because of the Ty Dillon and all these lap cars kind of fighting to stay for the free pass position, we see a lot of drivers like Chase Elliott and William Byron push their way up and get closer to the Denny Hamlin and Alex Bowman. So it would shake up a few things in the top 5. But Christopher Bell, what a stage 2 win! Such a green flag run, really held on to it all laps. And Alex Bowman comes in second, followed by Denny Hamlin. Chase Elliott rebounds back to 4th after the pit stop, and Kyle Larson gets the top 5 in the stage. So all around, some strong pace cars for that green flag run.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a good, bounce back for Chase Elliott. After his 15-second stop, he's back up to 4th, and he is for sure in it to win it. He'll probably be outside of row 2, you would think, for the stage 3 restart, and he'll have a great opportunity to, still win this thing, which we talked about, me thinking as an Elliott fan watching the race earlier and saying, he's done. Well, he's back in this thing with how good his car really is. Even with the poor air driving in, 4th, 5th, 6th, those positions.
Yeah, for sure. And just getting as close as possible to the front is really the only thing he could do. He's put his head down and didn't put any fault on the pit crew guys, said everything was good. And, drove to get back up to 4th and, really contend with the leaders. So as we see the pit stops, Christopher Bell with such a quick pit stop. I don't know what Toyota does for these pit crew members to get them as fast as they are, but they have just, outpaced everyone on pit road, and props to him. So he'd obviously get back on the restart, leading with Chase Elliott on his inside, who had a great pit stop. So really see the rebound from his pit crew and from the crew chief of Alan Gustin. Everyone rebounded heavily, put that, slip up or mess up behind them as we get ready for the final stage here.
Yeah, and just as we get back to green, we're not going to be green long. Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott's going to hang on, get to the inside of Christopher Bell in turn 3. Bell's going to try to get back to the gas. He's going to get sideways, and he's going to spin right in front of the entire pack. No one's going to hit him, but caution will come out. And, oh, man, Christopher Bell, after such a phenomenal stage 2, such a shame that on the first lap of the final stage of the race, it all goes down the gutter.
Yeah, for sure. Just disappointing. But we will know, this wouldn't put an end to his day, but just a mistake, especially, running that outside in the top lane. Just unfortunate, really. I think he had easily the best pace in his car so far. So this would put a little bit of hindrance on that Ream number 20 Toyota Camry. But as we know, he would get, safely back. No really too much damage to talk about here. Just a little bit of a mistake here on the restart.
Yeah, but now with Christopher Bell out of the equation for now, that now means that Chase Elliott is back to the lead. Wow, it fell right back into his hands. You love to see it. Well, I love to see it. And Denny Hamlin on his inside, but Elliott is going to clear for the lead. Bowman is going to challenge Hamlin and get by in second. And we're going to see Hendrick 1-2, a great run for Alex Bowman. And, Dover, it's always been a great track for Alex. So you love to see him running up here, runner-up halfway through the final stage of Dover.
Yeah, for sure. And, just as you quickly say, what a run. Well, Chase Elliott would kind of overshadow him here with putting about a 2-second lead over him as we get, pretty much 10 laps into this stage 3 run. And then we see Hamlin make a move on him in the inside. And just want to touch on Chase Elliott again. The only way he was going to back up in this lead to showcase his car is with his pit crew. And I want to touch on that again. Such a good rebound for that pit crew to get him back into second. I know Bristol kind of helped him out by wrecking himself. But I was happy to see it. I feel like this Napa number 9 was easily the best car all day. And just unfortunately with that pit crew mistake, it didn't really give him a chance to win that stage 2. And, I was rooting for him here. I wanted him to complete this, get this win at Dover. And it looked like he was going to do it 100% as he has, as this green flag run continues, a 3-second lead over Denny Hamlin, who, like I said, has a great car as well. But, don't want to brush over the fact that Chase Elliott is just hauling the mail right now and doesn't look like he's going to slow down.
Yeah, well, even though he's not slowing down, something else could possibly make all these cars slow down. And around lap 300, it has been indicated that to all the drivers and teams that rain is on the way, and whether they like it or not, it is going to hit Dover, and it's going to hit hard. So, Chase Elliott, you hate to see it, but continuing to move on as the race would stay green, the rain continuing to get closer, not quite here yet. He's going to stay in the lead. Hamlin is going to cut it down to just over 2 seconds as, lap traffic. Chase Elliott coming up on it again, and the green flag cycle again is going to start around lap 320. But, just about everyone's going to pit except one guy who thought maybe he could jump the rain. And, I'll let you maybe say who that was.
Well, I believe we were talking about is Noah Gragson in the 4 car. Going back, I was going to say, not too long ago, almost, 6 years ago now, 2019, I believe Justin Haley would stay out, on the Daytona night race, and he would win as the rain would, call that race. Once you get halfway, if you don't know, NASCAR, if there's imminent weather, can call the race at any point. And who's ever leading wins. So for Noah Gragson, who you mentioned on the last podcast, has been involved in has been involved in an incident in every single race. I perfectly fine with the call. Like I mentioned, points do not matter for this guy at all. He can get all the points he wants. It's just not going to matter. A win is what he needs to get himself in the playoffs. So I have absolutely no problem with it. Looking back on the race, the radar was heavily, filtered with rain. I thought it was going to happen where the caution was going to come out. They're going to go red flag rain, but rain took a little bit to get here. So obviously he would have to come in pit road. He couldn't stretch it out any longer, but did a great job keeping it as long as he can out there just in case.
And there was one man that, after a so-called spin on the outside of Chase Elliott, he would have a little extra fuel and he would be able to stretch it a little further than anyone else, and that being the Ream team, number 20, Christopher Bell. He's going to end up the leader here with about 50 laps to go. And guess what? He's now the leader, and weather is here. Can you believe it? Christopher Bell is going to go back to the top 5 at Dover after a spin because of Mother Nature. I honestly could not believe this.
Yeah, this is crazy, and I don't want to say it's, all luck pretty much, but just an incredible pit call from Adam Stevens, and the strategy, which was so important at Dover, really got him this track position to get out here in the lead. And we would see the weather caution at lap 337 for imminent weather as it was pouring down here at Dover. Like we mentioned, the Xfinity race, the day prior, the rain would cause the race to get called and Connor Zilic would win. So I was expecting it to, rain a little bit more than it did. Obviously, we would get back green here not too long later as they did a good job grinding the track as quickly as possible. And it would be kind of almost like a sunset race here at Dover with, the sun getting, almost down below the horizon here. So going to be a crazy restart here as we're coming to 40, 50 laps to go.
Yeah, and it's going to be a Hamlin-Bell front row. Joe Gibbs leading the way. Hamlin's going to get in front of Bell. Oh, we've seen this before with Ty Dillon having a little bit of an impact on it, but, there's not going to be any lap traffic. right away as Chase Elliott is going to slot into third behind Bell. But now into the equation, because of the rain as well, we see the 3-car of Austin Dillon. I'm going to be completely honest. This might be the first time all season his name has been mentioned on this podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did, kind of roast the hell out of him at Las Vegas, but first, for surprising, he always does some stupid thing where stays out as long as possible or tries to mix up the strategy. But I don't have any problem with this. Obviously, at being in the position he is, he's not the driver to win a race or be a dominant guy. So shaking up the strategy, I have no problem with here. But obviously, with guys like Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell, it was just no chance for them, as Hamlin would get over to half a second lead. So you can see the pace on Hamlin. I think Bell's splitter was a little bit damaged from the wreck. You can see the little bit of an aero difficulty and a little tight getting out of the corners. So obviously going to be an issue. And as well, rain was reported outside of turn 2, but nothing would really come of it for that. So a little bit, some things that could shake up. And as we see Ross Chastain here making contact with the wall at a turn 2 in the top 15, he would bring out the caution as he would cut that tire down and get heavy toe link damage on that right side.
Yeah, and can we mention that this hit, when shown from the back straightaway camera, this is a really, really hard hit, and I don't think we really took enough time to talk about this impact. There is no Geiger counter in the car, but I would love to see the G's on this crash. It has to be very high. That car beeline straight into the wall. We're not talking Cody Ware head on into the wall at Chicago, but this is at a much higher speed and another scary situation, but luckily nothing to come of it. He's able to get out of the car and be okay. So great to see that for Chastain. Not great to see that his day would be ended, but his caution flag would allow Mother Nature to bring another rainstorm in to Dover, and we would have about an hour red flag with about 20 laps to go. And we didn't think we were going to get back green, but this is where I learned another new NASCAR rule, that NASCAR has what's called the sunset rule. And it is that we have until 8:20 p.m., at least on the East Coast, to complete a race. And whoever is in the lead after 8:20 p.m. or once the clock strikes 8:20 p.m., it becomes the white flag no matter how many laps are left in the race. And the race will be called official when that driver gets back to the line. So a really interesting rule to see really being put to the test here by NASCAR, and will allow us a really cool shootout situation, as we will have a good amount of time to finish this race. And I don't think the rule is going to be implemented here.
Yeah, and the only reason I knew about this rule is from last year's Chicago street course race where you saw Alex Bowman get the win. And, the laps were, he still had about 20 laps to go, but obviously getting too dark around the track. So they would bring out the white flag, as you mentioned, the 8:20 time slot was there and present, and he would get the win. So bringing that rule up here again for the first time since that. But on this restart, we'd see some things shake up heavily. Denny Hamlin with Christopher Bell on his inside for this restart, and Christopher Bell makes yet again another mistake, I guess you can call it. I'm not 100% on him, but off of turn 4, that car would snap around on the inside of Denny Hamlin, get super loose off of the wake, and he would go around. He would collect many drivers here as the checkup was heavy. We see Noah Gragson get sent off the back of Ty Dillon. We see William Byron get tagged into the wall. His day would be done. And just things that would heavily shake up this finishing order, and a wreck that I did not expect here after the rain delay.
Yeah, for sure. This is going to shake things up big time, as William Byron is going to be taken out in this. Noah Gragson having a great day. He was able to flip his entire race around with the rain coming in, and he's taken out. Oh, it's just such an unfortunate crash here for some guys. Bell, his day continues to be up and down, but we're going to have to continue to move on. These drivers, I believe William Byron is the only driver here that would be totaled, and his day would be completely ended. I think Christopher Bell and Noah Gragson would be able to limp it around. for the end of this race. But yeah, what a crazy situation. And I do want to mention that before we get to this overtime restart, certain pit stop by the 9 team of Chase Elliott, which confused a lot of people, including me myself. In third place, both the leaders, Hamlin, Bell, they decide to stay out, right? And then you see Kyle Larson, Austin Dillon in front of Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott's in fifth. And I believe you knew a little more about the pit stop than I did. I didn't get the exact details of the pit stop. I don't know if you did, but not the right call by crew chief Alan Gustafson here. And Chase Elliott's race would kind of be relatively set back quite a bit here by this call.
Yeah, and I agree with the points. I don't want to put blame on anything. I don't know if Alan Gustafson thought maybe people behind him would pit with him, or I don't know if they were like, no matter what, we're going in, it doesn't matter what the leaders do. But I don't understand this at all. I'm trying to find, the other side of the story to maybe agree with this team on the call. But seriously, you had the best car all day, leading 230 of the 407 laps were completed. You had the pace to run up here with Hamlin. You showed it all race. And you just kind of throw it away with this pit stop, which you didn't need to do. We had the rain pit stops and the strategy call there, not a few laps earlier than the Christopher Bell wreck. So obviously going to overtime, the last thing you want to do here is pit. It's so frustrating. And I'm not even Chase. I like Chase a lot. I'm not obviously, his number, he's not my number one driver, but I wanted him to finish this race and can complete this race and get his second win of the season so badly. And I was in awe, really. I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion left. And, I get it. Alan Gustafson, he's a competitive crew chief. If he has an opportunity to put tires on for his driver, he's going to do it. But Dover, it's just not one of those tracks. As we saw, he would lose a ton of time when he would fall into lap traffic. And that even with fresh tires, it didn't matter if you were in traffic. So, yeah, I don't understand it all. I can say it 1,000 times, but no matter how many times I say it, it's not going to change what happened, and we will have to move on. But we will get to overtime restart number 1, and it's going to be Hamlin and Larson on the inside and outside of row 1, with Hamlin getting cleared by his teammate Chase Briscoe helping him clear Kyle Larson, but they will not get back to the white flag. Zane Smith and Ryan Preece are going to make contact on the backstretch and are both going to go for spins and contact into the inside wall, bringing out another caution. We're going to head back for a second overtime restart.
Yeah, and this wreck would honestly help out Chase Briscoe heavily here, getting him on the front row and, having some clean air for the restart and really showing his car for the first time we've seen since stage 1. He's been in that top 5 quietly. Hasn't shown the pace that you'd like to see. So this second overtime restart was going to be real interesting. And as we see on the restart here, Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe, as Briscoe would edge ahead of him in turn 1, couldn't clear. He was kind of in the same position as Christopher Bell was before he wrecked. So off of that turn 4, coming to the white flag, kind of the same thing happened with Bell. He got so loose off of Hamlin's side. He was trying to side draft him as much as he could. I think the rain definitely played a part in slicking up this track and with how hot it was as well. So running that inside line and, Hamlin just would obviously clear and blitz by him. A hell of a drive for Denny Hamlin, who would obviously get the victory, almost a half a second over Chase Briscoe. Man, I know Chase Briscoe was hurting after this one. He wanted this one badly. Martin Truex Jr. was, provident at these tracks. And I know he wanted that win for the 19 team with James Smalls as his crew chief. And, he got that win at Pocono, but a second one would not hurt. So a little bit heartbroken for Chase here, but cannot be overshadowed by the drive of Denny Hamlin. Got to give props, got to credit where credit is due. The man at the ripe age of 44 can still drive it like he used to. And, I believe this would be his 3rd win of the season. So a heavy favorite here going into the playoffs to win this championship.
Yeah, for sure. But something else I want to mention, Hamlin's not getting all the kudos here when this race ended. After that first overtime crash, Ty Dillon was brought back onto the lead lap, and we already know what happens here. But now that he's back on the lead lap, Guess who was right in front of him? The 42 of John Hunter Nemechek. And Ty Dillon would do exactly what he did to Alex Bowman, put the bumper to the 42, and would slide by him on the white flag and would pass him, I believe, for 21st place. I could be wrong there. No, for 20th. Nemechek would be 21st. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Unreal. And Ty Dillon would be heading to the final two at Indianapolis to win $1 million. Unbelievable. And I did say this off camera, but obviously being in the future, it unfortunately would not happen. But I did say that if Ty Dillon won the $1 million, I would buy a shirt of his, which unfortunately would end up not happening. But God, so close for Ty Dillon. Oh, man.
Yeah. I will say that JHN was not as much of a fan as Alex Bowman was to this bumper run. It was a little bit more aggressive and out of the groove, but hey, we're racing for $1 million. You got to expect it, but he was definitely not the happiest, which I get it.
Yeah, and you're in the final four for $1 million.
Got to go for it. You got
he's going to push you a little harder, but this is at higher speeds than Sonoma last week, and I saw replays of what Ty did to move him out of the way, and I don't think it was anything egregious or too much to say. It's not like he fired down in there and flat out wrecked the guy. He moved him up the track, NASCAR style, got by him. Fair play.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's like I keep saying, it's for $1 million, so you got to expect it. But I get the frustration. But the one thing I do want to say on this Dover race, I thought this race was one of the best Dover races I've seen in a hot minute. I mentioned we had the talk about, the 900 horsepower package that they were going to add. I don't even know if that would have made this a better race. I think this was a really fantastic race. Obviously, the stage 2 was boring, but it is what it is. I mentioned the problems we saw at Bristol, which is, the same track, compound with the concrete instead of the asphalt. And you mentioned if that could be a problem. But I thought this race was fantastic. I thought the passes for the lead were there. And the ability to pass in heavy air was also prominent, a little bit hindered, but improvements are definitely being made in tracks. I think other tracks are, the improvements are heavily noticed than some others, but the only thing that I care about is improvements being made, and we can 100% see that here at this year's Dover race.
For sure. This was a race where, in my opinion, the problems of the dirty air, it helped the race just as much as it hurt the race. And, it kind of leveled out, and it gave us a pretty good Dover race for standards. Typically when we're coming into Dover, we have pretty low standards. So maybe that's part of the reason we saw it as a good race, but I really don't think it was. I think it was an overall, just all-around good NASCAR race.
100%, and that brings us right into the race results finishing here. Obviously, Denny Hamlin wins the race, leading over 65 laps, gets the Xfinity fastest lap to add that extra point there, gets his third win of the season. Chase Briscoe behind him, what a run. Gets second, can't complain, obviously would like that win to get his second win of the season. And Alex Bowman in third, don't want to overshadow him. Only led one lap, but was running in the top 5 all day. And we see his teammate Kyle Larson just behind him in fourth. And Ty Gibbs, who would obviously move on into the championship round of this bracket challenge, if you could call it that, at Indy. So a good day for him as well. And a guy that, going to mention again, Chase Elliott, led over 200 laps, had the best car all day. And unfortunately, strategy didn't play out for him. But a top 10 day, obviously you want the win, but it's going to help him out to regain the regular season points lead over William Byron here. So a positive, obviously outweighed by the negatives there. Obviously want the win, but still an amazing day for that 9 team.
Yeah, and continuing to move down the leaderboard, we see Bubba Wallace, a good run. He's up about 15 spots with a 7th place finish. Ryan Blaney up about 25 spots with an 8th place finish. Busher in 9th, Keselowski in 10th, both RFK Fords there rounding out the top 10, so good runs for both of them as well. Continuing a little further down the leaderboard, just outside the top 10, we see the 8 of Kyle Busch, the 45 of Tyler Reddick, whose $1 million hopes would eventually end, finishing 12th as Ty Gibbs defeated him. We didn't talk about him at all, as Ty Dillon is basically getting all the paparazzi going to the the final race here. So It was a good run for Tyler Reddick. He definitely deserves a kudos and maybe a round of applause for making it to the Final Four, and I feel like no one even really knew he did. So it's just an all-around good job there. And going further down the leaderboard, we got Michael McDowell, a good run in 13th. Austin Dillon brings it home 15th. Justin Haley in 17th. Christopher Bell rebounds to 18th. And Ty Dillon in 20th, beating Nemechek, who's there in 21st.
Yeah, and just running through, finishing this off, some guys that had some not so good days. Zane Smith would recover back into 22nd after his wreck in the overtime restart. And then we see guys like Josh Berry running in 28th here, who started in that top 10. And then some drivers that would obviously DNF. We got William Byron, Noah Gregson, Ross Chastain, JJ Yelly, Hocevar, Cody Ware, and AJ Allmendinger would all not complete the race. So, like I mentioned, Chase Elliott regained the regular season points lead over William Byron. So something to watch out here as we only have a few races left in the season. Obviously, that is a huge bonus in playoff points for the regular season points winner. So something to fight for guys who are already completely locked into the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And now that we're through the finishing order, not to throw Dover behind us right away, but it's time to move on to the $1 million race, the Brickyard 400 there in Indianapolis. So what a great crown jewel race. And let's get into our picks to win it. I'll let you go first.
And my pick to win, as we do know this race already happened, but we did make our picks before. Got to keep saying that. My pick was the 6th RFK car, Brad Keselowski. And some people might be saying, whoa, what a weird pick. I haven't mentioned his name for the right reason at all this season. Well, he was a previous winner here. And I really think this late season push for RFK is going to be prominent. And I have high hopes that one of these cars, if not multiple, are going to lock themselves in with a win. We see the tracks up ahead. We see Richmond. We see Daytona night race, which obviously is heavily dominated by Fords. So I'm hoping for this RFK late season push. They really always pull something out of nowhere in this August late season. So I'm pulling for a Brad K win. Obviously, we know it won't happen, but I was hoping for it.
Yeah, you love to see it. RFK, they love to pull magic out of a hat here towards the end of the season. It's what they do. They're very clutch. So, being just a week in the future, it's unfortunate to see Brad not be able to bring it home. He was super close last year until he ran out of fuel, but he will end up having a good run. But I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. I'm going to go for another huge redemption name. And you might not think of redemption when you hear this name, but it's the 5 of Kyle Larson. He's the defending winner here. He's had a nightmare rotation here with IndyCar in the Indianapolis 500. So what better story would it be than if he can go back-to-back here, completely turn his season around here as, we're getting close to the playoffs. So, I've got the number 5, Kyle Larson. He's going back to victory lane for his 4th win of the season.
Absolutely love that pick, and I'm sure many people would be on the same boat as you, before that race happened. But one little announcement I want to make before we end this podcast off. I know this one was a little bit longer. We had a lot of information on this one, so hopefully you guys learned some things about Dover that you may not have noticed. But I want to make sure everyone knows where you can keep us updated with us when we're not posting podcasts. Our Instagram, it's just upside down thoughts _ We have a link tree there with everything that you can find us on, every single podcast platform, every single social media platform. We have a Twitter, we have a YouTube, which I upload shorts from the podcast from time to time. So if you miss one and you just kind of want to watch the most interesting points that we make, I upload the most prevalent shorts there on YouTube, and they actually do pretty well. And I also upload the podcast on YouTube as well. So if you want to watch it on there, you can. You won't be able to see our faces or anything like that, but if you don't care to see what we look like, you can go on there and watch it. So that's all I have for this podcast. If you don't have anything else, we can end it straight away here.
Yep, I've got nothing else. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, guys.